Her name was Ada, and she was everything I wasn't: soft-spoken, obedient, the kind of girl people pointed to when they talked about a good Christian daughter. She wore her hair neatly braided and always had a way of keeping her uniform crisp, even in the sweltering heat. Ada came to the seminary because her parents thought the world was too dangerous for a girl like her. They wanted her close to God, shielded from temptation. I came to the seminary because my parents thought I needed structure, something to pull me back to the right path. I wasn't rebellious in the way people imagined, but I questioned things too much, felt things I wasn't supposed to feel. They hoped the school would fix me. Instead, it made me even more curious about the things I wasn't allowed to explore. Ada and I weren't close at first. She moved through the school like a shadow, quiet and unnoticed. She sat at the back of the class, rarely speaking unless the teacher called on her. At meals, she would sit with her Bible open, even when the dining hall buzzed with chatter. Then one afternoon, I found her crying under the mango tree near the chapel. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, and she was clutching her cross necklace like it was the only thing holding her together. "Are you okay?" I asked, sitting down beside her. She didn't answer at first, wiping her eyes quickly like she didn't want anyone to see. "It's okay to cry," I said softly. "You don't have to hide it." She sniffled and finally whispered, "I'm fine. I don't know." "You don't look fine," I said, my voice light but kind. "Do you want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. But I stayed anyway, sitting with her in silence until she calmed down. After that, something shifted between us. I started noticing her more, and she started letting me in. I would sit next to her in class, walk with her to the chapel, find her in the library during study hours. She was shy at first, but I could see her opening up little by little. One night, during lights out, I slipped into her room. "I brought something," I whispered, holding up a small flashlight and a bag of roasted groundnuts. "Let's go to the courtyard. It's too hot to sleep." She hesitated, glancing at the door. "We are not supposed to." "No one's going to catch us," I said, smiling. "Come on, it'll be fun." She followed me, her nervousness melting into curiosity. We sat on the stone bench under the stars, sharing the groundnuts and talking about things we never spoke about during the day. "I feel like I'm always pretending," she said after a long pause. Her voice was small, almost a whisper. "Pretending to be what?" I asked, leaning closer. "Perfect," she said, looking down at her hands. "Like I have everything together. Like I don't ever doubt or question anything." "You don't have to pretend with me," I said, reaching out to touch her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers trembled under mine, but she stayed. That night, I kissed her for the first time. It was soft, hesitant, and for a moment, I thought she might push me away. But she didn't. She kissed me back, her lips warm and unsure, like she was testing something she didn't fully understand. For weeks, we kept our secret. We found quiet corners to talk, to hold hands, to steal moments that felt like they belonged to us alone. We wrote letters to each other, folding them into tiny squares and tucking them into our Bibles. I told her it was okay, that love couldn't be wrong if it felt so right. But secrets don't stay hidden for long. One morning, during assembly, the chaplain stood at the front of the hall with a stack of papers in his hand. His face was grim, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I have found something deeply troubling," he said, holding up a crumpled note. "This was discovered in the dormitory. It is a letter that should never have been written, filled with words that stray far from God's teachings." The hall was silent. Everyone's eyes were on him, but I could feel them shifting toward us, toward me and Ada. The chaplain continued, "We are here to follow God's path, to walk in righteousness. But some among us have chosen darkness. He didn't say our names, but he didn't have to. The whispers started almost immediately, spreading like wildfire. Ada's face was pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her Bible. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it would be okay, but I couldn't move. That was the moment everything fell apart. The moment the assembly ended, Ada ran. She didn't wait for anyone to say a word to her. I watched her slip out of the hall, clutching her Bible like it was the only solid thing left in her world. I wanted to go after her, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The whispers grew louder as people began to leave their seats. Some avoided looking at me altogether, while others stared openly, their faces full of disgust or curiosity. I caught snippets of their murmurs. Who do you think it was? Did you see Ada's face? I heard they found more than one letter. By the time I left the hall, the damage was done. The story was spreading fast, twisting into something uglier with every retelling. I found Ada in the chapel, kneeling at the altar. Her shoulders were shaking, and I could hear her whispering a prayer through her sobs. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure of what to say. When I finally stepped closer, she flinched at the sound of my footsteps. "Go away," she said, her voice sharp and cracked with emotion. "Ada, Go away," she repeated, turning to glare at me. Her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with tears. "This is all your fault." Her words hit me like a slap, but I couldn't blame her. She was terrified, and so was I. "I didn't think anyone would find out," I said quietly. "That doesn't make it better," she snapped. "Do you know what they are going to say about me? About us?" "I know," I said. "But we can get through this together. We just need to." "No," she interrupted, shaking her head. "There is no together. This was a mistake. A sin. I should have known better." Her words felt like a punch to the gut, but I didn't have time to process them. The chapel door creaked open, and we both turned to see one of the senior students standing there. Her face was tight with disapproval. "You're wanted in the chaplain's office," she said coldly, her eyes flicking between us like we were something dirty. I glanced at Ada, but she wouldn't look at me. The chaplain's office was as tense as I expected. He sat behind his large wooden desk, flanked by two other senior staff members. The air was thick with judgment, and I could feel their eyes boring into me as I sat down. "Do you know why you're here?" the chaplain asked, his voice stern but calm. I nodded, but I didn't speak. He held up one of the letters. "This is deeply troubling," he said. "This kind of behavior is not only against the rules of this seminary but also against the teachings of the Bible. Do you understand that?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We have spoken to Ada as well," he continued. "She has admitted her part in this, but she insists she was led astray. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" I wanted to defend myself, to explain that it wasn't as simple as they were making it out to be. But I knew it wouldn't matter. In their eyes, I was the tempter, the corrupter. Anything I said would only make things worse for both of us. "I'm sorry," I said finally. The chaplain sighed, leaning back in his chair. "This seminary is a place of discipline and spiritual growth," he said. "We cannot allow such behavior to continue. You will both face consequences for this." By the end of the week, Ada and I were separated. She was sent home to her parents, while I was expelled. The chaplain wrote letters to our families, explaining our fall from grace in the harshest terms. I never saw Ada again. For months, I struggled with guilt and anger, guilt for dragging her into something she wasn't ready for, and anger at the school for turning love into something shameful. But as time passed, I started to see things differently. What happened wasn't just about us. It was about a system that forced people to hide who they were, to bury their feelings and live in fear of being discovered. The fallout from that time shaped me in ways I didn't expect. It took years for me to understand that what happened wasn't just about us, it was about a system that punished love and curiosity, that turned something tender into something shameful. I don't know if Ada ever found that understanding, but I hope she did. Years passed before I heard anything about Ada again. By then, I had moved to a different city, far from the seminary and the life I left behind. I had started over, new friends, a new job, and most importantly, a new understanding of who I was and what I wanted from life. One day, while walking through a crowded market, I saw her. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then she turned, and it was unmistakably Ada. Her hair was shorter now, and she looked older, more confident. She was standing at a fruit stall, a little boy clutching her hand. I froze, unsure of what to do. Did she even want to see me? Would she remember me as a part of her past she wanted to forget? But before I could decide, she looked up and spotted me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she smiled, a small, hesitant smile that sent a wave of relief through me. I walked over, my heart pounding. Ada, I said, my voice uncertain. She nodded, her smile growing warmer. It's been a long time. We talked briefly, catching up on the surface details of our lives. She told me she had moved back home for a while after the seminary, then eventually found work in a nearby town. The little boy, she explained, was her nephew. I thought I'd never see you again, I said quietly. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. I thought about you a lot, she admitted. I was angry for a while. At you, at myself, at everyone who made us feel like we were wrong. But that anger helped me figure out what I really believe. And what do you believe now? I asked. She smiled, a bittersweet look in her eyes. That love isn't something to be ashamed of. And that no one gets to define who I am except me. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made my chest feel tight. I'm glad, I said. You deserve to be happy, Ada. So do you, she replied. We didn't exchange numbers or promise to stay in touch. It didn't feel necessary. Seeing her like that, whole, unbroken, was the closure I didn't know I needed.